Hello, I'm Carl Euland Helverson, and you are watching Living Green on a Blue Planet. This is the second part of a focus on the Anderstown Powwow. The Anderstown Powwow took place in Alexandria, Indiana, in Beulah Park, September 7th and 8th. And this is a powwow that has national dancers, so it's an intertribal dance. Lots of arts and crafts, lots of native food. So we're talking bison burgers and bison stew and fry bread and Indian tacos. So good stuff. The first episode really focused on the overall atmosphere and the celebration that is powwow and a little bit of the history of powwow. The second half focuses on one specific person. And we're talking about a historical interpreter, and his name is Jim Sawgrass. Now, Jim Sawgrass is a educator, communicator from Florida, from the Muscogee tribe, and his base of educating in terms of settings and camps and schools is Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, though he's traveled all over the place and has also founded a program, and that program is the Deep Forest Historical Native American Program. And so he really engages people. I'm a member of the Indiana Master Naturalist Program. They emphasize the importance of historical interpretation. And historical interpretation is not giving someone a calendar or a chart and giving them dates and saying this occurred on that date, but making it come alive so that the viewer, often the young viewer, gets engaged and starts thinking and wondering, what if could this be? And so it's not unusual to see historical interpreters dressed like someone from the Civil War or a canal boat operator or someone in Fort Wayne at the fort. And in this case, he is a Muscogee Indian from Florida. He brings with him artifacts that span the ages. He focuses first on pre-contact. So what was life before that? What were the artifacts? How did they feed themselves? He's real clear that in their area of Turtle Island, they didn't live in teepees. They had houses, longhouses, hogans. And then he also focuses on how everything changed after contact with the colonial Europeans. And so he's energetic, he's exciting, you'll learn a whole lot. He's very good at engaging. You'll hear the audience talking back to him, repeating things. The other thing is that you're going to hear a lot of background noise because we're right next to the dance arena. And so you have this intertribal dance going on. You have the announcers. You have the drumming. And yet everybody in the tent that's listening to Sawgrass is really listening to Sawgrass. So he's very engaging, very authentic. Hope you appreciate it.
Thank you. How's everyone today? Good. All right, let me introduce myself. Hinchke, Stongo, Pahagnosli, Jabajifkaros, Istichara, Muscogee.
Yatahe.
What? You a Navajo?
That's me.
Well, I said hello to you in one of the oldest languages ever spoken in the eastern United States. My family is Muscogee. The Muscogee language is of the South. I drove all the way from Florida to be here. I'm very honored to come back again to the powwow to share the culture of tribes right here in the eastern United States. When I say eastern United States, we're talking east of the Mississippi River, where native people never lived in lodges like you see out there, teepees. Our houses were houses. Some as big as the tent were inside, some bigger. Roofs made of bark peeled off the trees in giant pieces. Roofs made of woven mats like the wigwams that you'd find in the Great Lakes. What you see out here is a small hunting camp from my tribe. I live in the swamp where lots of palm leaves grow. And the palms are used down there, just like up here they would use the woven mats or the bark peeled from the trees. Long ago, farming was our way of life here in the East. We learned at the end of the Ice Age how to plant crops, And by changing seeds from hand to hand,
Thank you, straight answers.
foods such as corn went from Central America all the way here into Indiana and further north. And so corn and beans and squash are what many tribes noted as the three sisters, because as they planted them in the same spot, the three plants actually helped each other, just like sisters do. These are what farming tools used to look like before old John Deere showed up. That's right. These are made from what nature gives us. A bone, a shoulder bone of a bison, which was an animal that once lived here as well, the woodland bison. And this one right here is made of rock. Many of the tools all over this country native people used were made of rock. And down where I live we have lots of shells. But shells that were traded for one hand to the next, getting from Florida to Indiana, would not be used for digging tools. Down there we would use it because there's plenty of them. But because it took someone a lot of effort to get that shell here, it would have been used for lots of other purposes instead. Like jewelry. The jewelry you're looking at would represent who we are, what family you belong to, what your position of the tribe might be, maybe where you come from, the markings I have on my body, my tattoos, my jewelry, my headdress, my language, are all identifiers of what tribe we are. Today in the United States there's 574 federally recognized tribes. But that's only a little bit of what was once here. This area here had a large concentration of tribes. That's why it's called today Indiana. But back long ago it was a different name, and I'll tell you about that in just a little bit. Would you like to see how this drill works?
Yeah.
That's how we would make those shells into beautiful jewelry. In this area, tribes would use the shells to make jewelry, or they would make signal horns, like the one I blew at the beginning to call you. Not a tool for digging in the ground. Okay? Now, down where I live, plenty of shells, and so they were everywhere. And so these are the farming tools from back in the day. And if you might note out back there, I've got corn hanging in the sun. There was no refrigerators. All food had to be dried. If you're going to save it, you got to dry it. No refrigeration. Either eat it now, fresh, or dry it so it can last a long time. Using the sun to dry things, we could dry the corn until it's hard. Once it's hard, we can store it away in containers. Everybody say gourds. Gourds are what we kept food in. It's what we kept water in. We sealed the tops of them using sap from the tree to make glue. And we could seal the top of the gourd to keep the corn in there nice and fresh. When we're ready to use the corn, we'll soak it in water in a clay pot and we'll cook it. Before pottery, one of the oldest ways of cooking was the rocks that you see me out there cooking on. Those are slate rocks and you can cook on them. Sometimes they'll separate or pop, but most of the time they're good for cooking on. But be careful what kind of rock you use. You would not want to use flint rock. That's what's on the end of there to drill the hole, a piece of flint. And as I push down, it begins to spin. Thank you to that round disc. As it spins, it winds itself right back up. And the drill bit, if I don't like it, I can take it out and put a different one in. That's called socketing, and it goes back thousands of years. Putting tools together just like we have tools today that go together. Now, Stone Age technology, using the pump drill, or how about the old bow drill, known as the fire-making bow. This is a rib bone of the buffalo. The loose string would wrap around the stick. We would push down on that with a shell or a nut, like a hickory nut shell, and you could push down on that. You could also use a shell or a stone, and you can make fire this way. The wood that's used on this would be certain woods that are very dry. One of the best ones around here is also growing in your yards in your neighborhood. Everyone say yucca. Yucca's got those long skinny leaves that have a sharp needle on the end. You know what I'm talking about? It's got that stem that grows up out of the middle with white flowers. Well, that stem, once it drops its flowers, is perfect for fire starting. It's the best wood there is for rubbing sticks together and making fire. The leaves of the plant can be pulled apart in little strips. And those little strips, we can then twist and make rope using that grass, yucca. You can make it long, and then you can make enough to make nets to catch fish or to tie things together. We didn't only use grass like yucca, but the palm leaves like the hut I have, the moss hanging in the trees in the swamp, the husk of the corn can be made into rope, the inner bark of a tree, the inside bark of the tree, the cambium layer, very stringy, can make good rope. And so I'm going to pass this around and give you an example of how rope was made. This is the inside bark of a poplar tree. Okay, poplar tree. I don't know if that grows up here. Does it? Okay. So that's the inside of the poplar tree. Okay. Now another tree in the area I mentioned to you earlier was the sap, the pine tree. We would take and collect that sap by scarring the tree. We would take an axe or tomahawk and chop into it just enough to scar through the trunk, the bark, and we would get that sap to start flowing. We could collect it in a little clay pot, and if you have enough of it, you could heat it back up, take ground up charcoal from your fire, and mix it in there, and you got nature's glue, okay? And that's very, very strong. I'm going to pass this around and let you see how hard this is. If I'm ready to use this again, I'll take a coal out of my fire with a stick, scrape it away, and then lay this right next to it, and it'll start heating up and bubbling again, and I can use it. Or I can just take it to a flame and make it drip off. The best way to use it is when it's in a cooking pot. Not one you eat, but a pot like this one that you don't care about. And I have my glue in there, and my glue sticks. Okay? So when this heats back up, it becomes liquid. I take it out and I use it as needed. And then when I'm done, it hardens right back up, just like you see. Okay? So that's how the glue was used. That's how glue was made. Let's give you a little sample of what it looks like. There you go. The tomahawk. Everybody say that. Tomahawk. Now these tomahawks are used in building things, but not by themselves. Anything made of wood has to be used with the help of fire to make it. If I have logs for my house, I want them to be a certain length. I don't chop them. That's too much work. It's easier to lay those logs across the fire and let the fire do the work. And so fire was used to build things. A canoe. Canoes were made to travel. We live by rivers. That's why English called my tribe the creeks. Some of our canoes were 20, 30 feet long. Making it was taking the coals from our fire and laying them on the log. As they burn down overnight, the next day we scrape the coals away and chop it till we start hitting hard wood again. Then we stop chopping and we scrape the coals back and do it again. And so back and forth, burning and chopping to make anything out of wood was how things were made back then. An area you don't want to burn, like the walls, you had to keep it wet, but yet not get the coals down there out. And so it was a big job making things out of wood and carving using the tomahawks. Now flint knapping is the art of breaking stones into tools, and all over the world people broke rocks and made their tools. Learning to hit that rock was done by the older men of the tribe, usually teaching the younger kids around the fire how to chip the rocks and how to shape the rocks. Using striking antlers and small pecking stones, they could shape the rock the way they wanted. The antlers of the deer also used as a knapping tool to help shape the rocks. And the rocks that you see up here on display, pretty much all of them were found in people's backyards and ended up in flea markets because no one knew where they had come from eventually 2 generations later. So if you found an arrowhead somewhere, put it in a glass case, not in a bag where they bang into each other and get all chipped up, and label wherever you found them. That way in the future someone will know. Yeah, they're all real, except for a few of them that me and friends have made. This one's over 2,000 years old. Now that's not an arrowhead, even though we call it that. That's a knife blade. And so knives back then would look like you see right here. And using that tree sap as glue, and also the animal's tendons as string, Okay, you can see what ties them together, the glue, and there's the tendon. That's right, animal tendon. We killed the animal, not a single bit of that animal is going to get thrown away. We're going to take the animal's brain, and we're going to rub it into his skin, and we're going to use it to tan the hide. Everybody say that, tanning the hide. Animal brain has tannin in it, and that's how the word tanning the hide comes, because it tans the hide. Now don't worry, we don't leave the brain on there just for a little while. We wash it, work it, smoke the hide over the fire, and it's a lot of work to make a tanned hide from raw to a buckskin that's tanned. And if done properly, it could be worth a lot of money, $200 to $300 these days for a buckskin, a brain tan buckskin. Don't worry, the brain's all on there. Don't be afraid to touch it.
And if you refuse and you don't dance, you must pay.
Didn't the women mainly do that?
$100. And if you don't pay that $100,
Yeah, that was one of the jobs that women had. I'll talk about that in just a bit. And so, animal brain was used to tan the skin. If you don't tan the animal skin, it'll get dried out or it'll rot. And if you dry it out, everybody say rawhide. This is dried out in the sun. The rawhide's what the drum is made out of that you're hearing. Rawhide can also be cut into strips. So now we can tie things together using the rawhide. See that?
don't be shy.
See how it's made? They took the stick and they cut it thin, folded it over while it was wet, because you got to wet things to make it bend like that. And so you got to do it when the wood's green, not when it's too dried out. So we can, thank you, cut that into strips.
And look at this young lady. She's volunteering, getting ready to.
Another part of the animal was the bones. You already saw some of the bones up there made into knife handles. But animal bones can be broken, scraped on rocks until sharp. Here's the leg bone of a deer. After broken and scraped, here's what it would look like. A pin, a pick, a dagger, a fish hook, a sewing needle, a hair needle.
I know you got your hair.
Anybody want to get an ear piercing? Sure. Well, that's what this one's for. Hold still. Let me go get a potato. Some bones were hollow, like bird bones. They became jewelry as well as tools for calling the animals. This is a bird caller.
How many people are here from Texas?
Anybody recognize that bird?
Thank you.
Turkey.
Made from the bones of a turkey. How about that?
I say boomer, I want you guys to say sooner. Boomer! Oh, come on, gotta be
The animal fat.
Boomer!
Animal fat was used as oils. By cooking it, rendering it down, boiling it, scraping the fat, the oil off the top. You could make candles like this one. You can also make oils for lotions. Soap is made from animal fat. So animal fat was used to keep my food from burning out there on the rock. And so the oils of the animals were useful. The hair was made into things such as headdresses, blowgun darts, the toenails, rattles for dancing. Long before bells were brought by horses of the Spanish, we had noisemakers like that. Inside the toenails of the deer is a small little bone. And that small little bone is perfectly shaped to be made into an arrowhead. And what ties the arrowhead on there? Anybody remember? The tendon, the sinew, okay? So the animal's tendons we use for string. This is the back strap of a deer tendon. We would soak this in water for a few minutes till it's relaxed, and then pound on it with a rock for a minute. It makes it come right apart. The little stringy pieces will stretch just a bit. We wrap something with it. When they dry, they tighten back, and then we add the glue. Glue was also made out of fish skins, animal hooves, and animal bones. That's what Elmer's glue basically is today. And so are you starting to see that when the native people killed the animals, they didn't throw things away? The animal's bladder became a water bag. Anybody want a drink? The animal's stomach became a cooking bag. The animal's guts, what do you think we did with that? Eat it, not me. My tribe's civilized. We cook our food all the way. Now, animal guts was used as bait for fishing. It was also used as fertilizer in the garden. If I want to catch that alligator you see out front there, I've got to have some bait. He likes the old guts, that's for sure. Down where I live in my backyard, there's quite a my neck, I'm wearing the teeth of a big giant alligator right here. That's what these are. From a 13, 14-foot alligator. The tail of an alligator can be made into a case to hold arrows, but in this case, I've got the sword made of the nose of a swordfish. I've got the alligator's tail right here, but over here is the foot, made into a pocket to put stuff in. What's in your wallet? It also makes a pretty good back scratcher too, I might add. And so we could take animal parts and use all of them. None of them went in the garbage. That's a fish skin made into a quiver. We didn't have garbage like that. In our villages, we had use of everything of nature, whether through weaving, making pottery. Fishing was a big part of life in the East. Instead of following the animals, we farmed and we planted traps in the rivers like this one. This would be used to catch fish with rock walls that guided the fish right in. When the fish go inside, sharp spikes in there keep the fish from coming back out. The spear that you see there is made to come apart. So whenever I spear this into a fish, the gig will take off with the fish full of fight, and wherever that fish goes, no problem. My float will follow. And so whenever the fish is worn out, too tired, I'll just watch for my bobber, watch for my float, and get there before the alligator does. And so fishing was big part of life. I've got a couple of fish hooks out here carved out of bone, alligator bone, deer bones, made into fish hooks. Now, I did not get to tell you this earlier today, so I will tell it in this program. Would you like to see some games and toys of the children?
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's lots of different games and toys. For the girls, at a young age, moms and grandmas would be their teachers. They would make dolls.
Anyways, this is where
Dolls made of husk of the corn. Dolls made of palm bark. This is Barbie's grandma and Ken's grandpa and baby Barbie. And by the girls listening to mom and learning from mom and grandma, they're going to know how to make clothing for their dolls. They're going to learn how to cook food for their dolls. They're going to learn to build a house for their dolls and take care of them just as if they were children. And by the time they are teenagers, they would be the babysitters of the tribe. And when old enough to get married, they would not have to leave their villages. In the eastern United States, the girls pretty much stayed in their village, and it was the men that they married had to leave their village and find their wife, making the girls basically the clan mothers or the owners of our homes. And so the women had lots of power in the eastern tribes. And people have asked me before, why did they let the women have all the power? Well, basically, the women make decisions different than men make decisions. Sometimes men's decisions get us into wars very quickly. And so our tempers flare. But the women a lot of times will talk with the other women and get settled a different way. Maybe through a stickball match, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. Now the girls being the owners of our homes and the raisers of our children, the keepers of our village, the men that they married must not come from their town. That would be a family member. So all the boys were not allowed to marry in their town. They had to marry outside of their village and go live in the girls' town. They had to build the house, whether it be a wigwam of the Great Lakes, or a Cherokee log cabin, or an Iroquois longhouse, or down the swamp where I live, Seminole Chickie. Everybody say that, Chickie? Chickie. No, that's not being sweet with you. That means a house. Okay? Chickie. Yep. That's a Seminole word for house. And so they were the keepers of the homes, and the boys had to build that house even though he didn't own it. Now his job was to put food on the table. And that means he has to be a good hunter. He has to be a good provider, fisherman, whatever. And so he had to learn the ways of the woods very early on.
Are there any other
He had to know what animal track he's looking at, what sound he's hearing in the woods. And he learned these things as a child growing up, playing games that taught skills of aim and listening to his grandpa, teaching him. The boys would first do their hunting in the garden, not out in the wilderness. Right in the garden where their grandpa can keep an eye on them. They would play games as children that taught aiming skills like marbles made of stones and clay and chunky stone. The chunky stone was a disc stone rolled down the field, and when it got to the other end, the boys tried to hit it with their spears to get points or hit it for distance. And this was a way of teaching hand and eye coordination and aiming skills. If you can hit this rock, you can hit a rabbit. And by the time the boys were 5 and 6 years old, they were already using weapons like the blowgun. Everybody say that, blowgun. The blowgun shoots a dart made of cotton, made of thistle, or made of deer hair. Okay? And the air will make that dart kill a small squirrel or a bird. And so the boys got their practice of hunting using blowguns in the garden. By the time they're old enough to go hunting with the men, their first job is going to be to chase the deer. They're not allowed to take the shot yet, even though they got a bow and arrow. Their job is to line up in the woods and make a lot of noise like young boys do. And as they make all this noise running through the woods, they're chasing the deer into the area where the best shooter is waiting. The best shooter's got a deer skin like that one over there on his back. And the face of the deer made into a mask. Underneath that coat, his bow and arrow waiting. And as the boys chase the deer there, that's where his job is. The camp that didn't participate will get some of that deer. And working as a team like this, our villages survived and got bigger and bigger. The boys also played many games.
Hey, you gotta dance.
They had to learn to carve things out of wood at a young age, because someday they're going to be carving their weapons. They learned to make sounds of the birds by wood carving little reeds. Bird calls.
Now look at this. Just an example. In all seriousness, this gentleman is a Boy Scout.
And doing that, that is how the idea of a flute came about, was a bird whistle.
The rest of his troop, and when he does get the coffee and take care of this arena, making sure that our singers have water and everything.
And of course later they made them even better. The flute is considered today a man's instrument, even though today girls do play the flutes. But in the native world it was a man's instrument, and it was used for courting a girl. Okay, that's what it was for. Now, native people a lot of times did not get along with each other. Surprise, yes, we didn't get along. We had wars and battles just like Europeans had wars and battles here in America. And that was long before Europeans arrived. If you think this was a utopia, don't think that way, because it wasn't. Battles took place all over territories and village space and things like that. But a lot of times battles could be avoided. A lot of times the game was used to play a war. Instead of fighting a war, we played a game and settled a war that way. In the northern United States, the native people played the game with one giant stick much bigger than that. But down where I live in the south, tribes like the Creeks, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole played the game with 2 sticks. The object was to run that ball downfield and hit it against the pole. If you hit that pole, you get a point. The higher you hit it, the more points you could get. It had markings on it all the way up. Now this game was very rough because the players could also use their sticks, not just to carry the ball, but to knock the ball out of someone's sticks, or even knock that person, trip that person to make him not get a goal. That was part of the game. And so our games were rough. If you think football's rough, you should see a native ball game. If there's no blood, it's not a real game. Okay? And so these games were very rough, but they were not played for fun always. Sometimes they were. Sometimes the children and the women were allowed to play. But a lot of times the game was nicknamed Little Brother of War, because the tribes used it instead of fighting a war. You ready? You ready?
No pulling here. No biting or scratching.
Up. So the old ball game, whoops, thought there was somebody back there behind you. The ball games were used for fun and also to settle a dispute amongst the people. All right.